Hey, we got to talk about PowerShell. So hear me out. You know, PowerShell probably is that like one tool that sysadmins always use to like make your job impossible or make your life impossible. So like they'll install a group policy at 3 o'clock in the morning by some Windows system job, and then that group policy takes down your SQL Server or uninstalls a virtual machine that you had somewhere. I don't know. They kill Outlook with it. They'll uninstall Minesweeper. Who does that? Minesweeper is like the only joy I have during the day sometimes, and then they uninstall Minesweeper. How dare they? Anyway, I'm here to tell you that you can use PowerShell as a Power BI developer or administrator, and even as a SQL Server database administrator or developer to help you with Power BI. And so we're going to talk about a couple things. As you can see over here, we're going to talk about how to install Power BI Cmdlets with it, which is a module that allows you to interact with Power BI from PowerShell. We're going to talk about how to export workspaces, export reports, export datasets, and then finally, we're going to show you how to export Power BI reports from Power BI directly into either your hard drive or even to OneDrive automatically, so that you don't have to spend time backing up every single Power BI report. And let's face it, you don't do that. When was the last time you took a backup of a Power BI report? If you're watching this video, probably never. I'm here to tell you that you can do it. You can do it very quickly. And that means that you can just set a job to do it, I don't know, once a week, once a month, however long it takes for your Power BI cycle to change, or however often you want to do it. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. But first, we'll do a quick tech check just to show a new keyboard and mouse we have. All right, so Keychron K2 is the latest one I got, or one of the latest. I got two of them last week, two keyboards last week. This is one of the latest. It's I think it's a 75 key, 75%. It does not have a number pad, as you can see, but it's not too painful to work with as far as like no number pads. I have plenty of them if I ever wanted one. I even have like small number pads that I can add to the side. It's really nice. I like the design. It's the first one with white keys that I've had since like, oh, actually I have a different one with white keys that I probably have in a prior video, but it's really nice. All right, so mouse is a new LoFree touch. So this is basically if a mouse was designed by a mechanical keyboard company. As you can see, it has swappable keys right here, and it's very retro future because it has this screen that shows your DPI. It also shows your battery level and the device you're connected to. It's pretty cool, and I really like it. It's about, I'd say it's about 90% the size of an MX Master 3S. So it's really nice, really like it. So far enjoying the experience. All right, so let's do this. Basically what we're going to show here is how to install Power BI Cmdlets, how to install DBATools if you possibly want to import this data into SQL Server as well as part of the process, but you don't have to do that. Then we're going to log in. We're going to list out some reports. We're going to download that sort of data to CSVs and SQL Server, and then finally download the reports and export them to PBIX files in your hard drive. It's very simple. I already have this script. You're going to find it down here in the description. Am I pointing to the description? I think I am. I never really know, but hey, just check the description. There's probably chapters going somewhere along here as well. I have this broken out into chapters. You can feel free to scroll to the ones that you desire, or go back easily. So chapters, description, the script is going to be below. Maybe the folder structure can be below as well. Haven't decided that as well. We'll talk about the folder structure in a second. Let's dive right in. All right, so what I'm going to do is pull up the documentation for Power BI Cmdlets, which you can see is right here. It shows you how to install it right here. It shows you the first couple commands that you can use, like Get-PowerBIWorkspace, Get-PowerBIWorkspace all, etc. Just know that in order to use this, you need to be in at least like sort of an admin level in the Power BI area, in the Power BI scope in your tenant, because of the fact that what I built actually transcends various workspaces. So unless you have access to all the workspaces, you're not going to get all the reports from all the workspaces. And that's okay. Maybe you just want some workspaces or just the workspaces you're responsible for. That's cool if so. If not, you may want to demo this to a Power BI administrator or even an Azure administrator, and then ask them to run it for you and then give you the output. Sometimes that works a little bit better. It's really your choice how you want to do this, but if you're finding that it's not giving you back everything you need, it's probably because you don't have the permissions levels that are necessary. Hey, give it to the sysadmin that always runs your stuff and tell them, hey, here's a chance to do something positive instead of taking down servers all the time. Okay, no, I'm just kidding. I love you, sysadmins. You guys are great. All right, so first and foremost, let's go ahead and install Power BI Cmdlets. The way you do it is this install-module-name Power BI management. I'm not going to run this because I already have, but you can also use it to update an existing installation if you can. Sometimes you might need to change the scope on this because you might not be an administrator, so it might not let you install. We're going to use, just in case, we're using Windows PowerShell ISC for this. I would not use regular Windows PowerShell. When you go to the start menu and you just type in PowerShell, as I'm trying to do right now, but my keyboard has decided it's not doing anything. Okay, when you type in Windows PowerShell, you can see there's Windows PowerShell and then there's Windows PowerShell ISE. That's the one I want. And moreover, you actually want to right click on that and run this as an administrator. That's going to get you the best results. If you're having any trouble, it's probably because you're not running as an administrator, and you might need to be an admin on your machine as well. Okay, so once you have the module installed using this install-module, and when it comes up, you're going to want to click like yes to all. It's going to ask you to, hey, this is probably bad or something like that. I don't know. Nobody ever reads those things, right? You're just going to say yes to all and it'll do the installation for you. It takes about 30 seconds depending on your internet connection. Then you're going to install, and this, I'm going to pause here. This is only for folks who want to import into SQL Server, import this data into SQL Server. So again, part of this is giving a listing of all the workspaces, all the reports, and all the data sets. Now, if you want to push this down to a CSV and that's it, no problem. You don't even need this portion. But if you want to export over to SQL Server, automatically, you're going to need DBATools. And so you can install module DBATools. Sometimes you'll need to add this scope current user. If you're not an administrator, it still lets you install it just as a current user, so it doesn't install for the whole machine. All right, so once you do install both of these things, you're going to log into Power BI using PowerShell. So I'm going to just say login-PowerBI. I'll run that using the run selection button. It's going to ask me for my username and password. Sometimes it doesn't. And now I can see my tenant, I can see my username, and I know I'm all good. So one of the first commands to try is usually Get-PowerBIWorkspace. Now, Get-PowerBIWorkspace, all it does is just give you a list of Power BI command or of Power BI workspaces. So here's all my workspaces that I have in my tenant. Again, this is my personal tenant. It's nobody else's. So I get to have free reign here. Now, I don't really like the way it's showing me, so I'm going to go ahead and apply the format-table command at the end. So separate it with a pipe and add a format-table, and now it returns it in sort of a table structure. That's easier for me to read, but it is not necessary for me to be able to export anywhere. Technically speaking, I could probably like highlight this stuff and export it, but you don't want to do that. Just follow the directions that are coming up. All right, so proof of concept right here, just to show you how a report is made. So basically, if I took one of these workspaces and I said, oh, hey, I want to see the reports that are in this workspace, all I would have to do is take the ID from this workspace, paste it right here after a -workspace ID command of Get-PowerBIReport, and then also show format table. And this will actually give you a list of the reports. So we can see that I have 2 reports right here, getting started in Power BI, secondhand POC. Those are the 2 reports that are in my, I believe it's development reports workspace. So let's give that a shot. I'm going to go to powerbi.com. I'm going to go to my development reports workspace, and there they are, getting started in Power BI and secondhand POC. Now, let's go back over to PowerShell, And that's a listing of the reports, but I'm still not doing anything with them, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is, this is optional. Only if you're using the DBATools to push into SQL Server, you're going to run a command that says set DBATools insecure connection for this session only. That's only if you're having trouble because your SQL Server is on a remote machine or something like that. I need to run this because my network is my home lab network is arranged in such a way where I do need an insecure connection to get over to my SQL Server from this machine that we're running this on. Okay, so the very first one, this is a set of code, and I think what I'm going to do is actually just separate this into multiple files, perhaps. One that gets you the workspaces, one that gets you the reports, and one that gets you the data sets, and then one that exports. So you might see 4 files, you might see 1, depending on how things go. And again, this script, the entire thing is going to be right down there in the description in a Google Drive link. So you're just going to have to ask me for permission. Once you click the link, it'll ask me for permission, and then we're good to go. All right, so here, what it's going to do is store all the workspaces. So all the data that's returned right here in this workspace data pool is going to get stored into a variable or an object called workspaces. So that's the $workspaces. If you haven't worked with PowerShell before, I recommend a book called PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. I'm going to leave the description for that below as well. But basically, it is a book on how to learn PowerShell for really necessary stuff and sometimes some fun stuff in sort of bite-sized pieces so that it's easier to digest and consume, and it's really easy to follow through. I love the books by Manning Press. I have tons of In a Month of Lunches books. I have an Azure one. I have a DBATools one if you're looking for that. That's really cool too. Anyway, that's basically just how PowerShell works, is you store things into objects and then you can do certain things with those objects, kind of like C#. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is export to a CSV. And then I'm also going to write the workspaces to SQL Server. Let's just run the export to CSV first. And what you're going to want to make sure is that this export CSV path variable that I have here, it has a destination. As you can see, I want to store all the workspaces in a workspace CSV file, but that's stored in the PowerShell exports and PBI exports folder. I want to make sure I create those folders first. So I have a PowerShell exports folder that I have, and then I have a PBI exports folder. That folder's empty, but it will soon be packed full of just 3 files, workspaces, datasets, and reports. There's nothing special about it. Okay, so here, what I want to make sure is that I highlight just the section here. So with this workspaces, I'm going to export that data to a CSV, and then I'm going to make sure that the path is the export CSV path that I just defined. No type information just means I don't want the data structure to come down with it. I just want the data itself. And then my delimiter I like to use is a pipe, just in case any of my data has commas. I don't have to worry about that. I just pipe delimit everything. SQL Server and all the other applications, Power BI for example, will digest that, no problem. This dash append here, you're only going to want to use it if you need to add things to the bottom. If you're just trying to replace it with the current value, that's what I would recommend, is to leave append out. I just have it commented here just in case. When you're doing things like loops, which we're about to do, that's when you're actually going to want to have it be appended, because otherwise it'll just keep replacing. But if you're just going to run this one time for workspaces anyway, you need to make sure that you leave append off so it can give you all of the workspaces. And so it can replace them every time, because otherwise what you're going to have is like duplicate rows. If you run this like once a week, you're just going to keep adding records to the workspaces, which we really don't need to, right? You can replace them every week. Anyway, let's go ahead and run it, and you'll see that we'll have a new workspaces CSV file. I'm going to run that section. And now I have a workspaces CSV file. Let's explore this with Notepad++, and we can see that there's a new file with a bunch of columns. The ID, the name, the read-only, these are all my workspaces. And you can see that there's pipe delimiters, not commas, just in case. For the most part, this stuff is pretty much empty, but it does give you the workspace ID and the workspace name, which is a really good one. And it also tells you whether or not it's premium capacity, or what type of capacity it is, if any. So that's a really important thing to have. I'm going to close this file and go back to PowerShell. And now what we're also going to do is we're going to write this data out to SQL Server using DBATools. Now, to do that, and you can skip this part if you don't have SQL Server, just delete this or just comment it out using, one of these for every line. Or you can also comment things out in PowerShell by opening a comment and then closing it like that. So line 70 and 76 will comment everything out. Okay, so we're going to use write DBA data table, and you'll be able to see documentation for DBATools at dbatools.io. I left links to everything up here at the top, and they'll also be in the description below. But we're basically going to use write DBA table or DBA data table. We're going to make sure it auto creates the table if it doesn't exist. My SQL instance, this is where you're going to change it to your SQL Server, whatever it is. My SQL credential, I'm going to use a user called SSIS user that I have. You need to change this to a user that can create tables and can insert data into them. And also that can access the database that you're going to put this in. So I'm going to put this into a database called Power BI Catalog. The schema is DBO, and the table is going to be Workspaces. And then what object do I want to pass in? Well, I want to pass in all the information here in this Workspaces object. And you'll notice these tick marks at the end of the lines. If you're not familiar with PowerShell, that just allows me to trick PowerShell into thinking that it's all one line, so I can separate things and have them be a little bit more organized. All right, so we're first going to go to SQL Server, and we're going to make sure that our Power BI catalog database is empty. We want to make sure it's completely empty. And if it's not, then what I'm going to do is just rename this database to 2024-11-29 because I created it yesterday. Rename the whole database, and then I'm going to just create a brand new database so that you can just follow along if you need to. So I'm going to name this Power BI Catalog. I'm going to make sure the paths are correct. If you're storing data in your C drive at work in a production environment, I don't recommend you doing that. That's on the same data drive as the OS. Never do that. Always have a separate drive for all your databases. I have a home lab, and I really don't care if this machine's dedicated to being a SQL Server anyway, and I only have one drive on this machine, so that's why I have it. But please do not store databases on the C drive. All right, so I'm also going to change the owner to SA because SA can never win the lottery or get fired or whatever. And then I'm going to scroll over to options, and I'm going to change the recovery model to simple because I don't need to take transaction backups every 5 seconds. And it failed for some weird reason. Oh, okay. So I'm going to name the files something different. I forgot to change the name of the files, but you don't have to do this part just because I didn't drop the database. I renamed it. In fact, you know what? Let's go through the whole experience. I'm being silly. All right. I'm just going to drop this database here. I don't want anything to go wrong. So I'm going to drop the database. I'm going to add a new database called Power BI Catalog. The owner is going to be SA. Hit OK. Now my database, my logical file and my log file are going to be correct. I have the options. I'm going to change it to simple recovery model because again, I don't need to take transaction backups. And now I'm good to go. That should be the experience that you get as well. And we should be good to go. Now I have Power BI Catalog down here. It is completely empty. As you can see, there are no tables here. So now let's go ahead and run the PowerShell script. So I'm going to take everything here, and that's actually going to, this file right here says 10:28 a.m. right now. It's going to say about 10:33, 10:34 because it's going to replace this file. If it doesn't exist, if you don't have it existing yet, it'll create it, but if not, it'll replace it. All right, so now we're going to highlight everything and run this. Now it's going to ask me for my credentials, or at least my password, and it's done. It's done. What did it do? It both created or replaced a file, so you can see it's 10:33 now, the timestamp on it, and it also created a table here in Power BI Catalog. I'm going to right click and refresh the tables, and now you can see I have all my workspaces. Here we are. the ID and the name, whether it's read only, blah, blah, blah. Capacity ID. So that's my premium capacity one. I named it Premium Workspace just so I knew the type of workspace it is. This doesn't seem to be very responsive. All of this data. I leave it in here just because it doesn't cost me much, but I wish it had more information. Maybe there is a way to populate it, but I haven't seen it so far. Anyway, I'm gonna bring down all that stuff as we'll do right now. All right, so that's to get your workspaces. Now I want to get all the reports in those workspaces. That's why I want to list those out too. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to use a loop. So first and foremost, we're going to start a loop that says, hey, give me all the workspaces and put them into sort of a container or an object. And for each, this line 92 here is really important. For each workspace in Workspaces, what is this doing? It's creating a for each loop. It's saying I want to use the Workspaces object, and I want to create a new object called Workspace to house each iteration of Workspaces, right? So if we're thinking of the list of workspaces, just know that it's going to create a workspace object for each one of these lines here. That's really important to know. Okay, so for each one of those, what we're going to do is we're going to store the ID and the name of the workspace. We're going to print them just on the screen, and then we're going to get all of the reports in those workspaces, and we're going to export them to CSV and also write them to a table. Cool. Sounds good. Same way, right? This writing to a table again is optional. You can delete or comment this portion if all you want is the CSV. That's absolutely fine. You're welcome to work with just a CSV if you don't have access to SQL Server. You'll notice that here I have append. Why do I have append? It's because since I'm iterating through workspaces, just think of it this way. It would keep just overwriting the file for each workspace, and you'd never have all your reports. You just have the last iterations reports, and you don't want that. You want all your reports in all your workspaces. All right, so let's give this one a shot. I'm just going to highlight right here all of this stuff. This dollar credentials is just getting credentials for me, so it doesn't have to keep getting the credentials every time it loops through trying to write to SQL Server. All it does is just get the credentials one time and then just reuse those values. So get credential is the way to do that. There might be better ways. If you're a PowerShell expert, feel free to let me know in the comments what better ways I can do for this. This is just the easiest one I found, so it doesn't keep pestering me for the credentials all the time. All right, so let's go ahead and run this using run selection, and you can see it's going to ask me for my credentials. That's absolutely fine. I'm going to use SSIS user. The user needs to have administrative rights to at least the database you're working with, by the way, or at least table creator and data input, right? Or DB writer, data writer, I think. Okay. Hit enter, and now you'll see that it is for each data set or for each workspace, it's listing them out, and then it's actually doing the report extraction into the CSV and the data set and SQL Server as well. Now you'll notice that there was a small issue here. There was an error right here, and anytime you receive this error, just look at whichever workspace it was. So you can see I received this twice, once for sim racing telemetry, right? Because we just wrote sim racing telemetry before we started everything, and then I got an error here, and then it kept moving on, which is perfectly fine. But then I got the same one again in Premium Workspace, and it took me a little bit to figure out that it was just because Sim Racing Telemetry, which is the first one that gave me the error, it is empty. There are no reports to write out, so the object is null, and it just tells you, hey, I couldn't write anything out. And then Premium Workspace, same thing. No reports in here, and that's why it failed. The only time you'll see this failure, or hopefully the only time you'll see this failure, is when you don't have any reports to export out or to list out. So now we're done. And what did it do? Number one, it created a reports CSV. Here it is right here. We're going to open it really quick, and you'll see that it has the report ID and the report name, the link to the report, which is really cool. If you're trying to create like a menu page in Power BI, you can bring this data into Power BI and create like a little menu page that always has the correct link. because you can constantly be downloading this and make sure. So that's a tip there for you if you want to automatically download the links instead of having to copy and paste them, from Power BI like you always do. You can download this and create a menu page with it. That's a pretty cool way to do that, right? And just keep it maintained. Now, let's see what the data looks like in SQL Server. So I'm going to go here to the Object Explorer, right click and go to Tables, and then right click and select Top 1000 from the reports. Now, we have the ID of the report, we have the name of the report, the web URL, that's the one I was talking about, and the embed URL. Just in case you embedded it, you can also have your embed link right here. That's super cool. And your dataset ID. So when you download datasets, or you download datasets here, or you list them out, you'll be able to connect it to whichever datasets. Because as we know, some reports, one dataset can supply data from multiple reports. So sometimes you do have that. Now, what's the problem here? The problem is, if I want to know, as you can see, I got all my reports from all my workspaces, but hold on a sec. How do I know which workspace each report is in? I don't know that at all. I have no way of knowing. So how do I fix that? Well, what I did was I went ahead and added a feature here. I added a feature that says, okay, I'm going to, for each workspace, which is just how this looks, for each workspace, I'm actually going to download the workspace ID and the workspace name, and I'm going to store those. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually run a for each loop on each report as well. So for each workspace, and then inside a nested loop, if you're not familiar with the term, inside each workspace loop, I'm also going to have another loop that says, hey, for each report, I want to make sure that I create a custom object for that report to store the data for that report in. And I'm going to stuff and define that object as the workspace ID first, and then all the other data attributes about the report. So as you know, we had the report ID, the report name, web URL, embed URL, and dataset ID, but I'm adding here, I'm stuffing the current workspace ID from the iteration of the workspace. And that allows me to also grab the workspace ID and include it in the outbound dataset. So let's take a look at what that looks like. The first thing I need to do is actually right click here and trash this reports. And I need to drop the table for reports. I would recommend dropping the table because right now the table's been defined as having just this ID here. It doesn't have a workspace ID, so it'll have nowhere to put it. So I will be dropping this table. If you like horror games, terrifying games, all you have to do is come back and watch me drop tables all the time. So I'm about to drop this table. I went ahead and dropped reports. There we go. Fantastic. Now, what I'm going to do is run this bottom script here, which again, for each workspace, it'll also have another for each loop that grabs the workspace ID. And we'll see what we can do with that when we're done. You can also have this line right here. Line 168 is just an output of the data. If you want to monitor it as it goes, you can feel free to run that output. If not, you sort of just have to wait a while and hope everything's going well. Here I also have some prints, 149 and 150. Sometimes those work, sometimes don't, but this output object always does work. All right, well, when it's not commented anyway. All right, so let's give this a shot. I'm going to highlight the entire section of the script, and I'm going to click Run Selection. It's going to ask me for my credentials, which I will happily provide. All right, and now it's just doing it. I'm just leaving it alone. The only knowledge of it iterating I'll have is that number one, it already created my new CSV, and number two, if I right click and refresh on tables, I'll see that there's also a reports table, even though I just dropped it, right? So I'm actually going to close this one here. I'm not going to select anything yet because I just want to let it do its thing. But the reality is I know it's working, and well, because it's running, you can again uncomment certain things to just make sure you keep track of it, but it'll be done fairly soon. And I'll also get a small error for any reports, any workspaces that don't have any reports. I may get a small error there, but otherwise there's one. where it for some reason couldn't reach my SQL Server, even though it's live. It's just sometimes my SQL Server doesn't allow connections because it gets sort of overwhelmed. It's a very inexpensive machine. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we are going to go to the CSV and make sure that the CSV is okay. Open it with Notepad++, reload it, and as you can see, now I have an additional column here on the left, a workspace ID. Technically, I could have put that at the end, but I decided to put it at the beginning. And now you can see for each workspace, I do have the workspace ID here, and then I have the ID of the report. That's super cool because it allows me to know what workspace each report is in. And let's go to SQL Server and see what that data looks like. I'm gonna go to my Object Explorer, right click on Reports, select Top 1000, and now I have my reports with my workspace ID. Now what's special about this? Let's take a look at this really quick, because when I right click and select Top 1000 from Workspaces, I get my Workspaces table. And if I right click on the tab up here and run a vertical tab group, I can see both the tables next to each other, right? But what I want to do is actually copy the name of the Workspaces table. I'm going to alias this as R for reports. Then I'm going to left join to the Workspaces table, and I'll alias it as W. I'll make sure that my columns have what they need. So this is the prefix for R. All these columns are coming from R. And now I can say, well, let's join on r.workspace ID equals w.id for workspace IDs. I'm going to right Control Shift R here to make sure that we have IntelliSense good. And now Control E to get it. I still don't see it, but it's because of the fact that I have to add my workspace name. So I'm going to say w.name as workspace name. I'm going to format this with Control KY because I have a SQL prompt. And now I'm going to run it again. And now I can see my workspace ID and my workspace name. Now, if you're just using CSV files, that's okay, right? Because you can still make this relationship or this join within Power BI itself. You can bring them in separately and then make the connection yourself using workspace ID to ID. That's absolutely fine. You can use that relationship and still run the same functionality. If you're in SQL Server, it's much easier to do it here and then bring this all in as a view. That's one choice you have. You can also just bring in all three objects from SQL Server separately. I have a video actually on why I prefer to use views when stored procedures instead of direct table access with Power BI. I'm going to leave the link right up there and also in the description, but I really don't recommend bringing tables directly into Power BI, and I talk about why and my methods for avoiding that and why it's better in that video. All right, so we are done with reports and workspaces, but what we want to do is also import data sets, right? So we have the same exact functionality just for data sets, and as you can see, it's basically the same exact code as reports, except I did for each data set in data sets. I'm still bringing in my workspace ID down here so that I know what data set I know what workspace the data set is part of. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and you'll see that it creates a file called datasets. So I'm going to highlight all this. It's going to ask me for my credentials again. And there we are. It's going to go ahead and run. And now it's listing out my data sets. Now, if you're not familiar with data sets, maybe you're new to Power BI, data sets are just what's called right now the semantic model. It contains the data model itself, and sometimes they actually contain a few visuals or possibly the copy of the report itself. They'll contain it there, but all the data gets stored in a SQL Server analysis tabular model and gets pushed up into Power BI. That becomes your data source, just like SSAS was. SSAS, analytics services, analysis services, sorry. So the data gets stored there, and then multiple reports can actually use that same semantic model. Power BI decided to rename datasets to semantic models recently. So when I go to something like data discoveries, I can see that the report is here, this little bar icon, and then this little ERD is what's known as the semantic model. They changed the name, but in PowerShell or in the API, it's still called datasets. So when you're pulling datasets, you're really pulling semantic models. That's really important to know. Okay, So it looks like we're done. And now that means we have what? A new datasets file here. Here it is, including the workspace ID. And that also means what? We have a new table. Right click, refresh on tables, and bam, here are our datasets. So the cool thing about this is that it shows you the configured by, it shows you the retention policy if you have one or anything like that. And the cool thing is I can also join from reports over to datasets, or I can just do the same exact join from reports over to datasets here, or over to workspaces, right? So I can say this as D, and then this D will replace this R, and now I have D dot this all and D dot workspace ID. Control Shift R to get rid of the squiggly lines. I'm expecting like Clippy to come up here any second now. Okay, W dot name as workspace name, and there we go. Now we have the workspace name for the data sets as well. Again, you can join all three of these tables together and then push them to Power BI to analyze things, or you can just import them separately into Power BI and then make the relationships there. That's 100% your call. Okay, so what have we done so far? Let's really quick just stop and let's go back to our agenda, which we have right here. No, we have that right here, up here at the top. There we go. We installed the Power BI Commandlets module. We installed DBATools, or I showed you how to do it. We logged in. We got workspaces, we got reports, we got data sets, we downloaded them to CSV, and we downloaded them to SQL Server. I have only 2 fingers up, but that was like 8 things. I don't know. I'm not great at counting. That's why I have loops in PowerShell and SQL Server and stuff. Okay, so the last thing we need to do is what will really save you time. And I left that to the end for the end because number one, I needed something like clickbaity that got you to watch the whole video. So thank you for watching the whole video if you're still here, or if you just skipped here from the chapters, I completely understand. But I really needed to show you sort of the easy mode of this before I showed you the more difficult part, which is how to export the reports automatically. And I'm saying difficult, but it's really just like slightly intermediate. It's not even that crazy. But basically you needed to do something that was easier to follow before I set you off on this path. So I'm going to go all the way down here, and we're getting to a section here where I'm going to let you sort of play around a little bit without causing too much trouble. And it is Get-PowerBIReport with a particular workspace ID. So I have a workspace ID that I copied here. It's one of my workspaces. I think it's data-driven sim racing, but I'm not 100% sure. We'll see it in a second. But Get-PowerBIReport dash workspace ID will just get you all the reports. We actually use that to download them, and then I have it as format table. So I'm going to click that, and it'll show me all my reports. I think this is the data discoveries workspace, if I'm not mistaken. And so I chose Kobe Bryant's shot selection analysis, but now I'm actually going to switch that over to F1 team journeys. So I'm going to grab the ID of F1 team journeys. I'm going to paste it here. Actually, that's the workspace. I'm going to paste it here in this command on line 258. Now, this command is export-PowerBIReport. And again, there's documentation on this. You are welcome to read that if you so desire. This is the easy mode again, but you're welcome to read that documentation and make the necessary adjustments yourself. I'm going to use export-PowerBIReport -workspace ID. I'll keep the workspace ID, and I'll replace the dash ID, which is the actual report ID. I'll replace that with the F1 team journeys ID. And then the out file is this variable that I set up here to define it. Now I'm going to want to make sure I name it the same, F1 team journeys, and there we are. Now what this is going to do is going to replace the following. I'm going to go over here, I'm going to go to data discoveries, and that's where I am right now. I'm going to open F1 team journeys. By the way, I have a video on how to make this report. I'm going to put that up there as well. It's really fun. It shows the journeys that F1 teams make throughout the year. We did all the data collection ourselves, all the SQL views, all the analysis, and then we showed the journeys using a flow map. It's really crazy how far they travel. Anyway, if I go up to file and I say download this file, it's going to download a copy of the report using the report in data, and it's going to store that in my downloads folder. Now what I want is I actually want to store that automatically, and so to save me the time of having to do that, because it seems simple when I just did it, but doing it for 50 reports, not that simple. I have an environment with 300 plus reports that I need to do this with, and so that's quite a lot. So when I run this, it's going to export to PBI export test data discoveries F1 team journeys. Let's see if I have that folder set up, because you want to make sure you have that folder structure set up. So I have a C, and where's my Power BI export test? There it is right here, data discoveries, and I already have my Kobe Bryant shot analysis. So let's see how this one goes. I'm just going to highlight those two lines and let's see if it runs. All right, it is done. It's done. That's it. There it is. I can open the report in Power BI desktop. It's a standard report. Imagine being able to do this, and all you have to do is maybe copy and paste the IDs, but it gets easier. I can show you right now how to do this on a loop basis, so it does it for every report in every workspace that you have. So there it is right here. I'm going to close Power BI because I don't want it to take up all the memory on this computer. So what I'm going to do is go to the next section, which is backup and export all Power BI reports in Workspaces. So this looks like the other one that we used actually to get the listings and push them into a CSV and SQL Server, but it's really not. It's all about exporting the report here. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to create a variable for each report, and that variable is going to be C Power BI exports. So I need to make sure that that folder exists. Okay, we need to make sure that that folder exists, Power BI exports. It looks like it does not. And what I actually did was I created a Power BI exports template. And basically what you need to do is absolutely like stop right now and make sure that this works. You need to create a folder structure that basically represents exactly how your workspaces are laid out. Okay, so if I go to Workspaces here, I can see I have one called Data Discoveries, Dataset Demos, Development Reports, Power BI Demos, etc. All these workspaces, I need to copy the exact name of these workspaces and turn them into folders. And that is what I have here on my C drive. I have a Power BI Exports template folder, which has blank folders. I recommend you doing this approach as well, just so you can always create them very, very quickly. I'm going to paste that. And then I'm just going to change the name of it to Power BI Exports. Hit OK here. And now I have every single one of my workspaces. I have them. They're just completely blank. They have no reports inside of them. They're empty folders. Why? Because if you look, what this does is dynamically create a file path based on Power BI Exports being the primary folder, and then the workspace name being the next folder, and the name of the report in Power BI. .PBIX. So again, what this does is just dynamically name your folders and put all the reports in folders that represent your workspaces. So you're not just stuck with one directory with 300 reports. They're actually organized based on the workspace they belong to. All right, so let's go ahead and run this. And basically what it's going to do is just create every single one of those reports. You can see that there's some errors here. Let's see. Let's see why. What did I do? What did I mess up? Oh, that's why. I didn't run the whole thing. So what I need to do is run it from all the way up here, from Workspaces response all the way down. I just ran the for each loop and that wasn't going to work. Okay, so let's try that again. And now it's going to run. It's going to list out each report as it's doing it. As you can see, it's doing every single one as they go. You might get some errors here. Might be because it's just not downloadable or something's messed up about the report. You'll be able to see which one exactly gave you an error, right? So this supplier quality analysis gave me an error. Retail analysis sample gave me an error. Procurement analysis sample gave me an error. What these are sample reports that PowerBI.com provides for you. They weren't reports that I deployed myself, so I'm not backing those up, and I really just don't need to. Human resources sample, IT spend analysis sample. I really just don't need these reports anyway, so I just don't care. All right, so is it done already? No, it's still going. There's bike ride share analysis. What you need to make sure as you do this as well is you need to make sure that you have the amount of space that's needed. Some of your reports might be 1 gigabyte in size, 10 gigs in size. You need to make sure that your hard drive has the space. If not, hey, just change this C Power BI reports to something in OneDrive that has unlimited space, or hopefully has unlimited space, and it'll actually export out to OneDrive. No problem, as long as OneDrive is synced with your computer, you can push them up there. That's what I actually do in my production environment, is I push them out to OneDrive. So there you'll have a limited space. Again, you just need to make sure that your folder structure is set up correctly for this to work. If not, it's never gonna work. In fact, I'm gonna add this important. Make sure that the folder structure exists before running this code. There we go. Watch the video. It explains it. All right. There we go. So we're still going here. Let's take a little tour, because it's okay for us to take a tour of the folders as we're doing it. So I'm going to go into Power BI reports. I can see Análisis de Datos Puerto Rico is not loaded yet. This one isn't loaded either. Is there anything that has? There's some. Dataset demos seems to have some reports already. Power BI demos has it. The premium workspace never had any, so it doesn't matter. Sales and marketing sample didn't need any either. Sim racing telemetry, still nothing. Right now we're in data driven sim racing, as you can see. So all those reports are coming in. In fact, I'm going to leave this folder open so you can see the files being added in real time. They'll actually start being added. It's pretty cool how it shows, and it shows the date modified too, which is really cool. The last time you deployed the report, that's when the date modified is. So that's really interesting as well, just in case. So let's see. It just keeps adding them, as you can see. There it is. It's probably going to wrap this one up sometimes. So why I feel the desire to keep the names printing out here is because this might take, I don't know, 20 minutes, 30 minutes on your side if you're running it for a lot of reports. And so I wanted you to be able to keep track of which report it's currently writing. What it does is it creates the file first, and then it writes to it, and then it moves on to the next file. So you will see the file here created when it's running. These are my biggest reports here because they have tons and tons of data about my sim racing. So just know that that's going to be something that you'll need to make sure you keep track of, is how much space those are going to use. Because as you can see here, my hard drive is probably filling up pretty quickly, but I still have 21 gigs. Yeah, it's red, I know, but don't worry about it. Power BI exports, and then let's see if there's anything else going on. Nope, it's still in data-driven sim racing, so we'll leave that for a second. Let's see if we can just review a couple things while it's doing its thing, right? Install Power BI Commandlets. We installed DBATools, or showed you how to do it. Logged into Power BI Commandlets, which is pretty simple. Ran a couple sample commands. We downloaded workspaces, reports, datasets, all to CSV, and also all to SQL Server, where you can just take them and join them up, load them back into Power BI that way, right, as CSVs, and just keep track of all the reports that you have in your system. Maybe make a small report about your reports. That's what I'm going to do in a future stream. And I think that's what you should do as well as an administrator. It shows you're on top of your game. And it also shows you, oh my God, there's a report there. I don't even know why it's in production. It shouldn't be there. We haven't used that thing in ages. It's probably not been refreshed in a year. So that is something you should be doing as well. And then we talked about how to export, or we're currently doing that right now, exporting your PBIX files out to SQL Server, or out to your file system. You want to make sure that you keep backups of these. I have a horror story about how my organization actually switched tenants from a public from a government to a public tenant or a private one, and we pretty much lost everything. And the only way to recover our PBIX files was actually through the API like this. So you want to make sure that you take these backups regularly. I don't know, once a week, once every 15 days, once every month. It's not hard. As you can see, it'll do it by itself. You can set up a Windows task scheduler task to take these automatically once a month, and then just send you an email when it's done. If you're a PowerShell expert or pro, or you just want to get familiar with PowerShell, but you know Power BI, this is an excellent way to keep building off this script. It's really basic, as you can see. So, okay, hey, we're done. That means all of my reports got exported. We had a couple errors, as you can see here. There's some red. You can see which one it is. Data-driven sim racing. It's probably too big. Oh no, it just already existed. I guess when the reports are called the same thing, you want to make sure that oh yeah, this was an issue. The reports are called the same thing in data-driven sim racing, and so I guess it just had an issue here. Fields param tests, I guess there was an issue. Yep, there it is. So you want to make sure that you tackle all these issues and then re-export those again. But here are all my files. They're out. Sim racing telemetry had nothing, right? That we got an error with that. We got Power BI demos. We had some development reports, or just one. Dataset demos, they're all here. Data discoveries, they're all here. Now, one final trick is, hey, if you want to keep these iteratively, meaning you want to store last month's without overwriting this month, because this will overwrite them. Hey, all you got to do is change this name to Power BI exports _ 2024 11/30, which is today's date, timestamp them, and then just make this folder again from the template with empty folders. Then you'll be good to go. Then you'll be ready for your next one. I recommend keeping that template folder. All right, so that's it. Man, I wanted this to be short, but here we are. I'm very glad that I was able to explain this, because now I can just send this out as a link to folks. And I really think this is an underutilized feature that you really need to start using. It allows you to take automated backups, and it just gives you a full listing of all your reports. Super easy, super quick. So I hope this was helpful. I have plenty other videos on Power BI, whether it's data related videos or data structure related videos, or just exploring different data sets with Power BI, and even some with SQL Server. They're all around my channel, and I think the channel pop-up is gonna probably start sometime soon. But yeah, if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions on how to better write some PowerShell, please feel free to drop them off in the comments. Otherwise, I hope this gives you some time back in your day, and I hope this makes you worry a little bit less about your Power BI reports. Until next time, hope you have a great one. Bye.